Okay guys, let's get started building this little succulent garden. The first thing I did was I just rubbed a candle around the edges of this entire shadow box, wooden shadow box, which I had in my stash. And then I painted, I just brushed on very randomly Little Birdie wild moss and let that dry. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to take Little Birdie sandstone matte acrylic paint, and I'm going to just put this out on my craft sheet, and I'm going to take my paintbrush and I'm just going to kind of dry brush this on over. Very random, very uneven, because I want this to have the look of an old potting shed. So I'm just, as you can see. So now that I've painted all these edges and I spritzed them with water and dried them, I'm going to come in with just a little bit of sanding along the edges just to kind of rough things up even more, because I really want this to look like a old potting shed where the paint is peeling. And this little sanding tool, I make these myself. You know how you get styrofoam blocks sometimes in your packaging? I save those and then I just do sandpaper. Just want to get these areas where the paint is a little heavier than I want it to be, and distress that and get that really good chippy paint look. So I'm pretty happy with that. That to me looks really good. So I'm going to set this aside and just tap out any sawdust and such that is in there. Now what I want to do is I cut from the Texture Brew this wonderful wood grain, and we're just going to adhere that in this large lower section. This little shadow box is 6 by 6, and this bottom compartment is 4 by 6. So I cut my paper to fit right down in there, and I did distress the edges and ink them with Vintage Photo before gluing in. And then on the top, from the Succulent, this is Succulent Garden, and you get 12 by 12 sheets, and I've worked with this and the white succulent for this, and images from the cut apart page. So I cut each of these little guys to fit in my windows above, and I want to stagger the depth of these. So I'm going to use my scissors, and that first one I adhere just exactly as it was, but just to kind of add some dimension and some interest, I'm going to put a couple of pieces of waste chipboard down in here in this middle one. And what this will do is it will just create a feeling of depth and dimension. So there's that one, and I'm going to adhere that right on the top, and then this one is also going to be direct to the shadow box like that. But I don't know if you can see that on camera, but it does make a subtle difference that's really pretty. So now what we're going to do is start building our succulent garden. And what I've done is from the 12 by 12 sheet, I've just kind of roughly fussy cut along the edges of this really pretty hens and chick paper, and then I just inked the edges with Vintage Photo. So this first one I'm going to put right about in the middle because I want this pretty wood grain to show, but I'm going to back this with a dimensional because I want varied heights on this, just to give it. The wonderful thing about a shadow box is how much dimension you can add. And if you don't have a wooden box like this one, you could easily use a cardboard box and just cut your sections and make that work. So I'm just going to do a single section here. And I know my paint is probably driving you crazy, but I don't want to clean that up quite yet because I'm going to use that in a second. So I'm just going to add my adhesive to the back. And I just laid my glue down. You can't be too concerned about beautiful hands if you want to be a mixed media artist. Okay, so you see how I put this first layer down, and it's just got one layer of that waste chipboard behind it. So now I'm going to cut a double layer for the next piece, because that's what that's going to do is it's going to make this front piece, which is going to go right here. It's going to make it pop up just a little bit more. So again, I'm just adding this to the back of my fussy cut and inked succulent garden paper, and I'm just going to do a double row. This is going to go just here. So now we have layers there. In fact, I'm going to take this out. I'm going to put a third one on it because I really want this one to pop so that it looks like a plant shelf. That ought to do it. Yeah, I like that better. So now I'm going to take my water bottle and I'm just going to dilute this white paint a little bit and pick it up with my brush. And holding my brush down at the end, I'm just going to tap this paint in, again, kind of randomly. And this just kind of creates, I don't know, to me it makes it look a little more organic and a little less as though you've just cut paper. And then I'm just going to come in with the tip of my brush and I'm going to just kind of go along the edges of this to soften those. Pick up some of those really big drips. And you can practice this on a magazine page if you're afraid to try it directly to your paper. So let me dry this and clean up a little bit and I'll be right back. All right, so now what I want to do, now that this is all dry, I've got this Little Birdie Berry Bliss embossing texture paste. And I'm not going to use this through a stencil. I just want to go in and kind of very lightly scrape it on to add just a touch, because these succulents have kind of a purple undertone to them. And I'm going to also combine some purple flowers, but I don't want this on there thick. I just want it to look almost like a stain. So I'm just scraping this on and scraping off until it looks the way I want it to. You can see it's just really subtle, like not enough that you would go, oh, that's purple, but just kind of there, and it will help everything tie together. Okay, so I want to create kind of a foundation for my little plants to set on. And to do that, I'm going to use this sisal from Little Birdie. And I'm just going to cut off some pieces of it and kind of shred it even a little bit more. Okay, so I've added some hot glue along the bottom, and I'm just going to press the sisal in so that it kind of looks like a straw bed for our succulents to grow in. I'm just pressing this in. And it doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to add elements on top of this that will also help to hold it in place. So these are Little Birdie. Aren't they cute? These are their succulents. They come 6 to a package. And this is what the package looks like, mini succulents. And I chose 1 purple and 2 green. And then the pots are white, and I just took vintage photo and smudged up the pots to give them the look like a gardener had been working with them. And I'm going to add some hot glue to the bottom, also along the back side. And I'm going to fit these down in. I want this purple one to be in the center, and I'm just going to hold that for a second. Let that glue set. And then just going to kind of tuck my sisal in there. And I'm going to take one of my green ones. And they do have a front, so make sure you're working with the front. The cute little hens and chicks are in the front. And I'm going to press this one in right here. I love these. I think they're so cute. And I don't mind this sisal hanging down over the edge. I kind of like how organic that looks. And then more glue on the third one. And we want to kind of evenly space these. So that looks pretty good right there. I like that. That looks good. And now what we want to do is I have these Floral Cafe Bernice Purple. And I like how they kind of go with these succulents. So I'm going to tuck these. Aren't they cute? I'm going to tuck these in between using my hot glue. Let's hold that in place. Just love these. I think they're so beautiful. So this is where we're bringing in our purple and a lot of dimension. I'm going to have the leaves go up on this one. Then I fussy cut another piece of this succulent paper. I like the way that looks. I'll go ahead and add these succulents. And I fussy cut these, and then I left a tab on the bottom and folded it back so that these will stand up on their own. And let's put this one right here in the middle. And then this little guy, let's put him right here. And I did ink around the edges with vintage photo. And then this cute little teacup, I want to go in front of this. And here's what I did. I created a little mechanism, and you just fold paper, cut a strip of paper, any paper, fold it in half again, glue it together to make this little triangle. And then this little guy will go right there. And I'll clean up all these glue webs after the fact. But the whole idea here is to create lots of dimension so that it doesn't look as much like paper as it does like a real little potting shed. So that guy goes right there. Then I've got this cute little terrarium I want to put right here. Or maybe down here. Yeah, I like it down there. And I rounded the backs of these out with a stylus on a foam pad. I'll show you real quick. I just took this round ball end and I pressed into foam to kind of round it out and give it a little dimension. You can also use a pencil eraser if you don't have a stylus. I recommend styluses because they're just really handy to have. I use mine all the time and for all sorts of different things. I'm going to tuck this guy back in here. And then one last little pot to go right. So now I have some Spanish moss. This is just some that I had in my stash. You can get this pretty much anywhere. And I'm just going to add this along the front of these to give them a little bit more of an organic feel. Just to kind of line those. So I'm just running my glue, my hot glue along the front edge. And then I just take a piece of this and place it in there. Then the last thing I want to do is bring in just a little bit more of my paint. And then to clear away all those little glue webs and dry everything off. And the finishing touch for me is always a bow. And I tied this big loopy bow with purple seam binding. And I'm just going to add it Again, use the point of your scissors. Then I also tied a burlap string bow just to kind of tie in with the organic feel of all that wood and Spanish moss and sisal fiber. I'm just going to press that in like that. Fluff it out. And I'll come back and trim the tails, but that's basically it, guys, how you can make your own little succulent garden. You don't even have to water it. Isn't that great? This is Kathy Clement for Little Birdie Crafts. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope I've shared some tips and tricks that you can use in your own crafty adventures. I'm going to go get my craft on.